Hey folks, if I asked you what the term compromised meant, what would you say? Would you say it's when an entire network gets owned by threat actors? What about situations where maybe you have two internal users, they inadvertently leak credentials to each other? Does that mean they're compromised? What about a situation where a company's social media accounts get hijacked? Is that compromised? What about an application in the back of a warehouse somewhere? That machine gets ransomware. Does that mean the organization is compromised? You see, it's a very nebulous term, right? There's not really a crisp definition of what the term compromise means. And so today I've got Eric Siren on the show, and we're going to kind of dive into this question and dissect what the industry means by the word compromised. So we've got lots of great discussions lined up. Hope you enjoy it. That and lots more on today's episode of SysAdmin Week. Hey everyone, it's a new week. That means it's time for another episode of SysAdmin Weekly. This is your podcast by sysadmins, for sysadmins, and dedicated to all the tireless tech folks working in the trenches day in and day out to keep our digital world spinning, whether the end users know it or not, right? So anyway, I'm your host, Andy Serwich, and I've got Eric Siren with me today. How's it going, Eric?
Doing good. How are you doing, Andy?
Doing good. We've got a lot of interesting topics that we cover on this show from time to time. And sometimes it's more, more specific, like, hey, we're talking about technology X or technology Y. Sometimes it's a little bit more, I don't want to say opinion-based, but I guess kind of opinion-based. And so today I think I kind of see it as a mix of the two. We're covering the question of what is the definition of the word compromised. Now, when we say compromised, of course, we mean in a security sense, right? You see all kinds of news headlines, right, where, company X was compromised, and, well, okay, it was, maybe one user account that had limited access, or it was company Y that's, all of their systems got ransomwared, the attackers had full domain admin rights and they owned the network, right? So I figure what we do today is we would answer that question. What is the definition of the word compromised? But before we get to that, we got a couple of recurring segments. Now, normally I would start our recurring segments with a news react segment, but I actually have some community feedback that I wanted to make sure that we covered on the show today. We posted, so this would be last week's episode on Hyper-V management drama. So Eric and I are recording this episode on August 17th. And so last week we released the episode again on Hyper-V management drama. And we had a comment out on the YouTube version of the episode. And the commenter basically stated, hey, that virtual switch management is a joke in Hyper-V. No clear concept of a distributed switch such as VMware DVS or the Open vSwitch project. And so I'll be putting a comment on the YouTube channel specifically, but I wanted to make sure we covered that here too, because it really ties into what Eric and I talked about in last week's episode when it comes to managing Hyper-V. Now, Eric, there's a couple of things that come to mind for me with this particular statement. The first thing is, those that watch the show know that, yes, I'm a Hyper-V guy, but I like VMware as well too. And I will concede that switch management in Hyper-V could maybe be a little bit better, but there are ways to do kind of the distributed switch thing with Hyper-V as well too. Eric, I'll let you take a crack at this before I add my 2 cents.
I often forget there are things I used to say all the time, and then I thought, well, everybody's heard that so many times out of me, I'm going to stop saying it. So I'm going to go back to something I used to say all the time, is if you're coming to Hyper-V from VMware, you're probably not going to hit anything more jarring than networking. It is such a different experience across the board.
It is.
And that entire episode is based around the idea that, the Hyper-V management story is not great.
Yeah.
So the comment is spot on.
It
It's
is.
not a
It
great,
is.
there's no great way to manage it. Uh, as for the underlying technology, let's be really clear that the term distributed switch is really fabricated. There's no such thing. It's every virtual switch in your ESXi cluster has the same settings, and that's what makes it qualify as a distributed switch. You can accomplish the same thing under Hyper-V the hard way, the expensive ways with BMM. It'll do it for you. You go in and go, this is what I want, push it, and it happens. The other thing, the way that I do it is in Hyper-V under PowerShell. I just have scripts set up for this is what I want, make it happen. So it's I don't want to contradict that comment there because the management story is terrible. But if the effect that you want is for all of your hosts to have the same thing at a relatively low lift factor on your part, you can achieve that.
Yeah, agreed. And those are the two options I was going to say. And for me, it always comes to, okay, what's the size of the cluster? Are we talking 20 hosts, 40 hosts, 2 hosts? And are there any other features that you need? Like basically what I'm getting at here, Eric, is like, is it worth it to drop SCVMM in place or not? If you're going to do it just for switch configuration, maybe if you have a lot of hosts, but for two
Even on
or
large clusters, I mean,
yeah,
you kind of have an idea of the sort of things I manage, and I don't allow VMM to manage them.
yeah,
I have a configuration script I run through when I deploy a new Hyper-V host that sets up the switch the way that I want it. And then VMM can attach to it. In the
yeah,
few places I have to use VMM, I let VMM play the balls it lies. I do not let VMM manage my switches for a lot of reasons, but
yeah.
we'd circling back to the previous episode. I don't want to rehash that too much,
No,
but
no,
I
no,
don't
no.
allow it. And the reason I'm saying this is mainly if you're going to pick up VMM just for the networking angle, don't.
Don't. Yeah. And see, that's what I was getting at was like, there's very few cases where if I was setting up a brand new Hyper-V cluster today, there are very few reasons I would put SCVMM in. Like, I'm thinking maybe 2% of cases, right? So definitely take a look at configuring it via PowerShell. Very doable. But yes, I concede the point as well, too, that management in the Hyper-V world is not always the best. So anyway, I appreciate your comment. Again, folks, if you have any comments that you'd like to add to the show yourself, you can always comment on our YouTube videos. Spotify also has a commenting feature. I try to keep an eye on both of them, but if you want to get directly into our inboxes, you can always go to email contact@sysadminweekly.com. We also have a newsletter out there as well, too, and you could comment on that, too, if you want. That's newsletter.sysadminweekly.com as well. So, with that, Eric, we're on to our nerd hour segment of the episode. And of course, it doesn't take an hour, but this is the segment of the show where my co-host and I talk about the nerdy, geeky things that we've been working on lately. And selfishly, I guess I'll go first, Eric. So I actually I don't have a lot of nerd hour stuff because I actually recently took a family vacation. So I was away for, I don't know, a 5-day weekend or whatever it was. We took a train ride from Grand Rapids, Michigan over to Chicago. So fun trip. It's about a 4-hour train ride. While I was on the train, both there and back, I was actually tinkering with the Ghost CMS, the content management system. So basically, Ghost is like I don't want to say a competitor because it's kind of different, but it's like a competitor to WordPress. So again, I've got a project I'm working on that requires a little bit more than a static web app, things that I would usually use something like Hugo for. But yeah, that's kind of the nerdy, geeky stuff I've been working with. Eric, how about you?
Well, you saw, I suppose, that Debian 13, the Trixie release, is actually released. So
It's
I
out.
have been
It's stable.
walking around, been bumping some things up and discovering a lot of the software I run on Debian is not yet ready for 13.
No. Oh no, man!
Oops.
And Debian tends to be fairly slow in terms of adopting new versions. So, like, I, who, I guess what I'm saying is, whoever runs the applications you need to run, like, they're kind of behind. Then,
Yeah. But that's fine. I mean, nothing of importance is broken. It's just a couple things. Well, that's going to be obnoxious until I get that sorted out, but nothing
Right.
bad. It's going to be fine. But
Well, good. Yeah, it's I actually have two systems running in the lab beneath my office here that actually are still running Debian Bookworm. So those need to get updated, but I guess what I would call my my production Linux workstation in the house, that's been running Trixie for I don't know, 6 months now. So um
early adopter.
early adopter. I once in a while I do that, and it wasn't a super smooth road. There were a couple of
No.
bumps along the way. There was a bug um with my Wi-Fi adapter where the system, if it just sat idle for any length of time, the kernel module would go belly up, which would cause the Wi-Fi adapter to freak out to such an extent that the only way I could fix it was to power off the system, pull the power cable, let all the capacitors discharge, power it back on, and then it was fine. And this was like a known bug in that version of the kernel. They finally fixed it, but yeah, that's what I get for running testing in unstable releases, right?
Yeah. I think that early adoption is a young man's game. I don't think I'm going to go back to that. But I say that even though, yeah, I realize that it's technically the stable release. There's no such thing as a stable release because how many, maybe thousands of people were playing with it in pre-release and then to
Oh
millions
yeah.
of people. I mean, yeah, the the rules change, and so I still got something with a serial number under 10,000, but I refuse to get a serial number under one. So the pre-release stuff, y'all play out, and I'm not doing that anymore. That's too much.
Yeah. There was a time where I ran Debian SID on the regular, and after my system went belly up like the third or fourth time, I was like, you know what? I'm not sure I'm a Debian unstable kind of guy anymore. So, like you said, it's a young man's game, right? So,
Yep.
anyway, well, let's get to our main topic for today. Again, we are answering the question of what is the definition of the word compromised in a security sense. And I guess where I would start with this conversation, Eric, is when you talk about a compromise of security, there's really kind of many faces to that discussion, right? I mean, you think about all the different things that can be quote unquote compromised, right? Accounts and credentials obviously are at the top of the list. Passwords can get stolen, right? Or commonly used passwords, which people are not supposed to use, but we know end users love to use very common passwords. You should have password rules in place to prevent the usage of common passwords, just saying. But common passwords are still an issue as well that lead to hijacked accounts, hijacked sessions. So I think because of my day job where I sit with one foot in the security world and one foot in the M365 world, the hijack sessions thing really sticks out to me because, uh, you know, Paul and I did a episode of this show, I want to say a couple weeks ago. I'll link that in the show notes, folks, where we kind of made the statement, and that's true, is that identity is the new firewall, right? And a session token is part of that identity, right? And in M365, we have seen a massive increase in the usage of reverse proxy style phishing kits. And if you're not familiar with what that is, basically an attacker will use a tool like EvilGenix, for example. I'm not vilifying EvilGenix. It's a legit penetration testing utility used by red teamers every day. But any tool can be used for ill use as well, right? But if you want to understand more about how that tool works, you can do a search for EvilGenix and you can find the GitHub page that talks all about it. But at a high level, what a reverse proxy toolkit does is it's essentially an adversary in the middle attack. The attacker creates a malicious link. They try to get a target to click on the link, surprise, and it navigates them to their server running EvilGenix in this example. Now, EvilGenic can be configured with a number of different templates. They call them fishlets. And you can create an M365 login page that looks super convincing. And so all that's happening now in this reverse proxy attack is the end users, they think they're logging in M365. They put in their username and password. The EvilGenic server captures that, forwards it to the legit M365 login service, Entra, forwards it to Entra. Entra says, hey, okay, yeah, you've got a good username and password here. Oh, you passed the MFA prompt as well, too, because, surprise, EvilGenics handles MFA as well. And then it passes the session token back to the authenticator, the EvilGenics server in this case. And the EvilGenics server passes the session token back through to the end. Actually, scratch that. Does not pass the session token to the end user. It directs them back to a URL that the attacker chooses. So if I was the attacker, I would dump them back out to the M365 login URL, the official login URL. Anyway, what this tool does is it captures that session token, right? And so now the attacker can log in to M365 services using that session token. So anyway, sorry, it took longer to explain hijack sessions than I intended, but that gives you a good tangible example of what we mean by hijacked sessions. Same thing with abused tokens. It kind of covers that. Hijack sessions, hijack tokens, kind of the same thing there. So on top of that, the other things I see, Eric, are, again, when I'm thinking about the different facets of what we could consider compromised devices and systems, malware infections, persistence mechanisms. So if I'm an attacker, I break into a network, one of the first things I'm going to do is establish persistence. And there's all kinds of different ways I could do that, right? And or the other thing I have on my list here is full control of endpoints. And often we see rats used for that, remote access Trojans, very common for that full control of endpoints. And again, that could be used to establish persistence too. The thing with rats, though, is a lot of modern EDR systems. A lot of modern EDR systems will catch rats, but not all, but most of them they will. So anyway, Eric, I'm going to let you get a word in here. Anything you want to add?
Well, I kind of want to back up a little bit. I think
Sure.
we almost lost the forest for the trees a little bit. So
Yep.
a lot of times compromise, especially for folks new to the industry or even the subject of computer security, they think of all their favorite TV shows where I'm going to hack in and I'm in. Okay. Yeah, there's nothing realistic about that at
Nope.
all.
You get the green
And
text on the screen, you know?
type, I'm in. Well, what does that mean? And of course, it's a narrative thing. It's something I'm not hacking on. But the people sitting in the writers' rooms at these TV and movie, they don't know. They have no idea.
I have to
Sorry,
pause here for a second. Have you ever seen movies where they're showing an IP address on the screen and it's like 539.68. And you're like, that's not a proper IP address. That doesn't work. That's not a thing.
And it's the same concept as the 555 phone numbers.
Right.
Those don't exist either. It's that might be deliberate. And sometimes they do things deliberately like that. Like I've seen people criticize, oh, they've got a police captain up here and he's got medals on and things that police captains don't have. And like, oh, so you're trying to say that they decided not to show people how to properly impersonate a police captain on television? I'm okay with this,
Right? Yes, very true.
So, anyway, so some of that I am okay with, but what I really want to point out is like I go to my job where I have legitimate credentials, where I do legitimate work, and I sit down, and half the time I can't remember where to go to find things. When we onboard somebody, it's like 6 months, and they're just all the time walking around like, I don't know what's happening, So the idea of somebody just tap, 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 I'm in, and now I have everything, like, what?
There are.
So let's really back this up and like there are so many different degrees of what it means to be compromised and what people have and what they don't have and a part of the reason I think is so read the breach notifications. I would say that's a really good place to kind of start getting an idea because they'll tell you this is what the attackers had access to.
Right.
right? So I think that's a great place to really kind of start grounding yourself in what it means to be compromised, because it's not tap, tap, tap. Now I have everything. That's not a thing. Like a lot of your major organizations, like you could have domain administrator powers and still not have everything,
Yep.
right? I broke the firewall. Okay. Like that's not great, but you don't have anything just because you got past the firewall.
Yep.
Right, there's always more to it, and yeah, so let's kind of start with the forest part, that it's never that easy. How about that?
Yeah.
Never that simple, it's never that small, there's never just 2 or 3 lines of somebody typing into a screen and now they've got your everything. That doesn't
Yep.
happen.
Agreed. And I think that's a good point backing up there. And I want to follow that up really quick with just one quick statement. So we're all clear here. A compromise of any kind is not great. Just, so we're all on the same page. I think, Eric, you and I agree on that. But there are varying degrees of compromise, like you said. And to your point, the forest for the trees, I just got done listing however many different things, right? And to your point, any one of those things is involved in a compromise. Like you said, that doesn't automatically mean they have access to the crown jewels. And what that always comes down to, again, kind of stepping into my security world here a little bit, is multi-layered security. If your network, your infrastructure is configured in such a way that one thing getting owned is all it takes, uh, that's not great configuration. Like, it shouldn't be that easy, right? And so that brings me to kind of the next point, Eric, and we've kind of touched on this a little bit now. So this is a nice segue into, is that degree of compromise, right? Is it a partial compromise? And I guess maybe, again, to dial it back and big picture here for a second, what's the definition, what's the difference between a partial breach and a full breach? To me, partial breach is like one of those things I just got done listing. But interested to hear your take as well.
Yeah, this is fun because I also think of, remember people like when my system is fully booted. Can you define the point at which a computer is fully booted?
To me, it's when the operating system is up and running
What
and
does that mean?
all services are running. And
Including the delayed ones or not including the delayed ones? And
to me,
what do you
it
mean by a
would
service exactly?
to me it would be any service that is necessary for the functionality of the operating system.
Uh-huh.
But
Okay.
that's my opinion, and I see what you're
Okay.
getting at. That's my opinion, right?
And somebody else will be like, well, I need
Yep.
I can move the mouse, it's booted. I don't know. I mean, and this is and there's a lot of disagreement on that, especially because like if you start writing software, you're like, well, I don't want this to happen too soon.
Yep.
So I need to wait for the operating system to be fully booted. And then like, okay, so what from a technological perspective am I watching for to say the computer is fully booted?
I don't believe
Hmm.
I'm not aware of a standard that has been
There isn't one.
defined for that.
No, there isn't one. And it's kind of
Yeah.
the same thing you're getting at here is so, and I think I know you talked about, I don't know if it was here, but I know you and I had a conversation once and you were pointing out that like for grandma and grandpa, if they write their passwords down and put them on a piece of paper in the closet, that's probably okay.
Yep.
Right. Because the level of effort for somebody to break in and actually get that is not, whereas like in an organization, you
Yep.
don't stick your password on the screen. So if I have done something like that, let's say, oh, here's a great one. How about Kentucky Fried Chicken has their 13 herbs and spices? Is that right? And they put it down on a piece of paper and they put it in a vault. So technically, if that's the only place it is, I can break into KFC's network and get domain admin and switch power and all the stuff and still not have access to that 13 herbs and spices recipe, right? So are they fully compromised? Where is that?
Where's the line?
Where is that exactly? And I would almost say it really, what am I after as the attacker?
Right.
If I can say as an attacker, mission accomplished, then I guess you're fully compromised. But then also, what if, well, I only want Sandra's password because I want to read her email and I have that. So mission accomplished. Are they really fully compromised? I guess if Sandra's email password has information I can use to bring the company out of business, I guess maybe, but
You
You know what
know,
I mean? Like you immediately get into what does that even mean?
and another interesting facet of looking at this, I would bet, um, I'm not involved anymore on like the IT auditing side of things. Back in my MSP days, I did a little bit of that, but I bet you like insurance and compliance auditors, they probably have a definition of some sort, I would think. And if
Or they
any,
just decided it's not worth talking about. Sometimes that happens too. Is they're like,
right,
what is it? What difference does it make? It's more of a, I would say from my perspective, it's like, we're going to have to put a dollar figure on this. What is the dollar amount? And as an organization, can we survive it?
right,
So maybe it's that point. If the organization needs to close the doors because of what happened, then that's a full compromise.
right,
Anything less, partial. I don't know. And I would almost say, does it really matter to split the hair down to decide full or partial?
yeah.
Other than another good thing might be, do we need to scrub the entire organization's digital footprint and start over from the beginning? Do we need to just tear it all down to bare metal and start all
See,
new? I would call that a full compromise.
I would call that a full compromise too, because for me, if I was in an incident response situation, I start, digging through an incident and I find evidence of compromise all over my network. I'm already instantly thinking like, okay, we need to burn it all down and start from scratch,
Yeah.
right? Because I have no idea. You're going to spend days, weeks, months trying to find every single persistence method that was established. Now, that said, and we'll probably talk about this a little bit later, but I want to mention it now because it's relevant. Forensics. Before you burn it all down, save your logs. Save all your logs,
Yes.
right? Save your memory dumps. But we'll get into that a little bit later. So, but I guess to your point, Eric, going back to your example of like when is a machine booted, it's kind of nebulous, right? I mean, you can't put a definition on, well, this is partial breach or this is a full breach. And to me, it comes down to architecture. And I know this is going to be weird to say, and it kind of goes along with the whole grandma and grandpa storing their passwords on a notepad and paper. Risk profile. What is the risk profile? So let's go back to that example for a second. I've said that, on session, on stage before, and I get funny looks from people in the crowd like, did he just say that? Oh my God, he's a security guy. Okay, so what's grandma and grandpa's risk profile, right? Assuming everyone in the household is trustworthy, grandma writing their username and password on a notepad and putting in a file cabinet that only her and maybe one of the other family members in the house knows that's where it is, probably not going to be an issue because your, statistically most common attacker from China or Russia or, one of those very common nation states that are not nation state actors, but attackers from the other side of the planet, right? They're not going to go get in a plane, fly across the world, land, break into grandma's house, and, oh, I got grandma's password now. They're like, again, it comes down to what is the risk profile. So let me now go into a enterprise example, right, of risk profile. So web server. Let's say I'm standing up a web server, right? And this is relevant because it goes back to my ghost example I was talking about in my nerd hour segment of the show today. I'm architecting a ghost deployment, a web server deployment, right? I want it to be hardened on the external side of the web server, but I also want to be able to manage it effectively without having to jump through a bunch of hoops. And so the way I'm deploying this web server, it's deployed in such a way that like, okay, I'm really confident that it'd be fairly hard to break this web server externally, but it's architected in such a way that even if it was compromised in some way, shape, or form, it would not put the other items on my network at risk. They wouldn't be able to get anywhere, right? So the blast radius would be limited to that web server, right? And so when we talk about partial to full breach, that discussion there, I think that, and this is my opinion, I'd love to get your take on this, Eric. I think we have enough technology now, both in things like zero trust and advanced security tools, to where if we configure things properly, and that's the caveat, right? Proper configuration, I think we can force partial breach more often than not. We can keep things at a partial breach and we can limit the blast radius. But that's my opinion, right? And the thing is people need to execute properly, configure things properly. And maybe this is because of me in security all these years now, that whenever I implement something new, I'm setting up something new, one of the first questions that crosses my brain is, how could this be abused? How could this be exploited, right? I'm just thinking like that out of the box now and architecting things with that in mind. And I think every sysadmin needs to do that nowadays. But anyway, I'd love to get your take on that too, Eric.
Yeah, I think you're hitting all those really high notes really well. Lateral movement is the thing to stop.
Yep.
You almost have to say, if somebody really wants in, they can get in, because you can't stop people from getting in without making it so that nobody can get in. And what's the point of having it if nobody can get into it? There's always that trade-off of, some people need to have access. And so in order to enable that, you're always going to leave a door open for people who shouldn't, all your hijacking stuff you talked about in the very beginning. So lateral movement is really, containment is the whole thing. There are things in my position that I have access to that I don't even know about, right? And I need to be contained. I would tell people flat out when you're like, "Oh, we can just give you access to this." Like, please don't,
Please
because I don't
don't.
know what that is, and I
Please
don't
don't.
want that, because there's no good that can come of me having access to something I shouldn't have access to.
Yeah.
I don't have a need to be in there, so don't do that.
Yeah.
So people, well, you're trustworthy. Okay, cool. And you know what makes me trustworthy is I don't do things I don't need to do. That's the definition of me being trustworthy. So
Yep.
I don't need that, and it's not going to hurt my feelings if. Guess what? I'm not in the domain admins group. Guess what? Doesn't bother me a bit. So glad I'm not in there. No business, right?
Same. I've had that a couple of times over the years where, like, here's the keys to the kingdom. I'm like, do I really need that? Like, that's pressure I don't want to begin with.
Right.
Two, it's not best practice either, right? Concept of least privilege, right? People should only have the rights to do what they need to do, and that's it.
And it's very hard. There's a lot, and I've seen a lot of recent debate, maybe that's not really working. The zero trust is not really working. All this is not really working. And I get that. The thing I think is we don't just throw the baby out with the bathwater. We don't say, well, yeah, it didn't work. So what's the alternative? Give everybody domain admin? That's not the point, right? You're never going to hit that magical holy grail of, yeah, we have zero trust and least privilege everywhere. Yeah, you're never going to hit that. But you get closer to it by saying, yeah, you don't really need this, so we're just not going to give it to you. And then if at some point you need it, you ask for it, and then we'll decide at that point, and we'll give it to you. Yeah. Because what I don't need is to somebody call me an email like, hey, how come you were in the system? And I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Then, oh, well, all right.
Now it's a security incident.
Compromised. Yeah, now it's a security problem.
Yep.
So just don't give me the powers in the first place. And it also makes my credentials that much less attractive.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And this kind of ties in with one of the items I've got on the list here, and that is detection and response. I want to talk about the human and organizational impact, but we'll get to that. But this is kind of a nice segue into the detection and response part of our conversation here. And, for me, it always comes down to multi-layered security. There's no security system on the planet that is impervious. It doesn't exist, nor do I think it ever will exist. You always have to multi-layer things. And I think the other thing, before I get into the detection part here, I wanted to circle back on is I see so many admins, they will sit down, they'll look at a server, and they will apply what they deem to be industry best practice security settings on that system, which, don't get me wrong, it's a great first step. If you're doing nothing else, at least do that. But I would argue that you're better off if you do a risk assessment for each and every system on your network, because the risk profile for this machine versus that machine may be different, right? Mm-hmm. An example of this would be there was I'm going back a ways in my career here. This was like 2007, 2008 timeframe. We had an old Windows NT domain lying around. and it was still needed for legacy stuff. There was some legacy stuff that was still in use. The risk profile for that is going to be vastly different than the risk profile for the newer stuff. And we took steps, that were necessary with that in mind. So there was a lot of network segmentation happening with that old NT domain and anything attached to it, right? With the idea that, hey, this is more vulnerable than the other stuff. So that's what my point is, risk profile on a per system, per switch, per router, whatever basis. And back to your point, Eric, that helps you limit that lateral movement when somebody does get shell access somewhere that they're not supposed to, right? So, which then brings me to detection and response. And I I've seen so many organizations, and this is I'm going to do my Family Guy reference here. You know what really grinds my gears? I've seen so many organizations, they have all kinds of monitoring, just crazy monitoring all over the place, and no one is watching it. No, no one is watching, and I think AI will help with that in the future, but you you need to keep an eye on logs, alerts. You need to watch for things like unusual logins, abnormal traffic, alerts from security tools. I could go on, right?
Mhm.
But
You got to tune your systems because the other side of it is it's not that I'm not watching; it's that I got 10,000
yep,
emails in the last 2 days, and
agreed,
I can't do
agreed,
it.
yep,
So, and
agreed.
I've had this argument before, like, well, what if you missed something? I'm like, I did. I promise you. If you sent me 10,000 emails, I didn't read them all. Well, you should. Nope.
10,000 emails,
Nope.
10,000 emails.
Not doing it. I'm not, and it doesn't matter how hard I try. It's irrelevant. I don't have them. Some people can sit down and line by line things and catch stuff. I am not one of them.
Well,
So 10 emails is stretching it. 10,000 is absolutely impossible. I cannot do it.
yep,
So
agreed.
tune your stuff. It needs to, and it's fine if you want to, like, I am a big believer in capture all the data, even if you can't process it,
Correct.
because maybe you can at some point in the future. Reading 10,000 emails a day is not realistic.
Right.
But putting 10,000 emails into a log, not emails, sorry, I shouldn't have said that. 10,000 events into a log somewhere that you can then maybe process, maybe not today, but like you said, AI, maybe at some point, or maybe you bring in an out. I kind of want to, sorry, I want to, I want to tie this back to something we were almost touching on earlier. I think we're getting into those places where this is bringing in outside help might make a lot of sense because I
Right.
know a lot of administrators are going to sit here and hear this stuff like, I don't have time for this, guys.
Yeah.
I don't have time for this. And you don't. You don't. Like profiling every machine in an organization is going to get out of hand.
This is
Uh,
full-time
this is where
rules.
you hire people. No, no,
Yep.
no, no. I would say because if you just want to establish a risk profile, probably not full time. You just need a lot of time.
Well,
So
I'm
you
thinking
hire that out. You
and
bring
log
people
analysis,
in.
right?
Log analysis would be a separate game. Log
Yep.
analysis is where you need to start saying, I can't process 10,000 emails, but
Yep.
maybe what I can do is either purchase or hire out.
Yep.
And maybe you do put somebody on full time. I mean, just there's a lot of variables here, but
Sure.
basically, when you get into the security stuff, you are hitting that point where maybe you don't rely on internal resources to do it for a stack of reasons. And some of them are going to be risk profiling every machine in your organization is going to take a huge amount of time, but it's a one-shot deal to get that initial lump. And then you can, we added a machine, we got a risk profile, deleted a machine, get rid of that, whatever. But that initial going from 0 risk profiles to the full organization, maybe you hire that out. Maybe you don't do that yourself.
Yeah.
And then when they come in, they'll say, here's a list of things that we recommend that you do. They leave you alone. Basically, a consulting engagement is
Yeah.
what I would call that. For your log analysis, again, 10,000 emails, you can't do it. Tools exist to help. Some of them are either not great or they are so expensive that they're not realistic. But maybe capture the data anyway. And at some point, maybe we have affordable tools.
And see,
Or you sit down as a little young professional yourself and say, well, I have Python here and LLMs here. Maybe I make the tool.
true. I was going to say that this is one of the areas where I'm really excited about AI because I don't know about you, Eric. I was just got done with my soapbox talking about how people should monitor and log everything. I'll be the first to admit I suck at log analysis. Like, it's just not my thing. I do it from time to time, but I think that's one area where I think AI is going to help a lot. And there's already some players out in the industry that are starting to do that. Coming back to your point about services to get outside help for some of the stuff we're talking about, there are a lot of vendors that provide like on-demand SOC. And if you don't know what SOC is, SOC, that's Security Operations Center, right? So they will do the monitoring and log analysis on your behalf, and they will call you should they find anything that looks suspect, right? So again, there's a cost for that service. But again, if you're in a situation where, like Eric is talking about, how you just don't have time, which is, the reality for a lot of people, that could be a very viable solution, assuming you can get budget for it, right?
Yes.
So,
Always the fun, trying to get the budget, but sometimes you just walk in and go, here, we can. The worst part about a breach is when you have one and you don't know about it, because that is like an infection that's just going to get
oh
bigger.
yeah,
They're going to. We've had. I mean, I've seen places you go in and we turn over. They call it indicator of compromise. You turn something up, and what you find is somebody who's created a back door, and it's just sitting there, and they're trying to sell it to somebody, and we're able to close it before it's ever put into use.
yep,
So yeah, these don't go away, and so the worst thing is to not know.
oh yeah. I've had cases
And
where back in my MSP days, it happened more than once. I'd go into a new customer, we'd start auditing systems, and oh hey, look, root C of this server, there's Mimikatz just sitting there, the executable, right? Like, okay, somebody was on the system that shouldn't have been at some point in time. It's more common than people think, unfortunately.
yeah, because there is a market out there. Hey, I broke in and I dropped Mimikatz or whatever, and who wants access to this company for $50,000 or whatever? They're putting prices out there. They're probably doing it in Bitcoin. Send me 2 Bitcoin, and I'll get you into whatever. So they're just sitting out there waiting on somebody to buy that access and decide, yeah, I want to get into that company. And you could be on that list, and
Yep.
I don't even know how to get to them. I'm aware of them, but I don't know how to get to them. So yeah, I couldn't tell you how to. That might be the lower hanging fruit, is how do I get access to the list to see if I'm on it? If anybody's selling my information, I don't know.
Well, I mean, we could do a whole episode on this particular topic, but I mean, at this point, everyone's data is out there multiple times over. I mean, like
Yeah.
everyone's, especially when you look at, like data brokers. Data brokers drive me crazy. Let's gather
Mm.
up all this data that we can on everyone. And oh, oops, we didn't do security right. Like
Yeah.
uh, I'm not going to step on that soapbox. I won't sit down for a while here. So, well, Eric, I wanted to kind of jump into containment, forensics, communication, recovery. I think that is a whole episode all by itself. I wanted to make sure we saved a little bit of time to talk about like the human and organizational impact.
Hmm.
And I want to start by talking about end user trust and privacy. Because I feel like as an industry, and again, this is me sitting in the security industry, I can fully admit this about our industry. We more often focus on the business fallout than we do end users. When you think about the end users, let's say I go and work for company X. I've given them all kinds of sensitive data to come on their payroll, right?
Hmm.
Direct deposit information, social security numbers, insurance information. You think about all that sensitive data. Company X doesn't do their security right, and they get breached, and their HR database gets exfiltrated. There's another breach of all my personal data, right?
Hmm.
And from a end user perspective, one, that doesn't feel great, nor does it inspire confidence in your employer, and it's not good for morale either. I've seen that fallout as an external vendor, thankfully, not as an end user in this case, but I've seen that fallout more times than I can count, unfortunately, and
Right.
it's not great. So, yeah, I when I think about that, the things that could lead to, the usual stuff, right? Identity theft, financial loss. I've already talked about the personal data exposure, just going off of my list here. But it's not great all around. But when we get into the business risk, it's a whole other list of possible fallout, right? Downtime is obviously the big one. Compliance violations, which could come along with hefty fines, depending on which compliance framework we're talking about. Brand damage, ransom payments. Oh, Eric, you and I were talking about what was it? I can't think of the name now. This is going to drive me crazy until I think of it. Um, that healthcare company that sits in between pharmacies, doctors, and patients. They do all that insurance processing. Change Healthcare. Change
Yeah.
Healthcare. You and I talked about that on a different podcast. A year or two back. That when we talk about downtime and brand damage, that affected like 70% of pharmacy, uh, pharmacy operations around the country here in the U.S. I mean, like massive, massive downtime. Now, what it's done for their brand, I can't say, but I can't imagine the sentiment for them is good at this point in time. But
Right.
that's just me.
Yeah, and it's so I mean, I want to summarize things quickly, and I just don't know how, because you get into we the real bad guys are the people who broke in, stole the stuff, and did all the damage. They're the real bad guys. But it's not going to change healthcare's reputation for why didn't you do a better job keeping them out.
Right.
It's not, and it's not going to change it for your organization or anybody else's either. They're going to, and the people who get fired are going to be yeah.
Unfortunately,
And of course, I mean, the human damage to that is, and we're not even getting into the people who couldn't get life-saving medication on time.
yeah, that's a whole
Uh,
thing in and of itself. There were people that could not get their medication, which is not great. So,
no, it was, and I heard a lot of heroism on the part of pharmacists everywhere. We're just going to do this. We're just going to make it happen. We got to, but it shouldn't. I mean, so many things say, well, it shouldn't be that way at so many different points, you know. But at the end of the day, it's as the company that was compromised. They're the name that people remember. I don't even remember anything about the people who actually did the breach, and
same.
it's not fair. It's not fair. Those are the bad guys. Those are the true villains of the story. But it doesn't absolve everybody else along the way that didn't do something to stop
That
them.
that was Black Cat, if I remember correctly. And there was drama there as well with the affiliate that brought the attack. That's again, the incident is right in the front center of my brain. But yeah, you're right. Like I'm having to dig a little bit for the threat actor information, but I seem to remember it was Black Cat in that case. So, oh, interesting.
Right.
This certainly could go on for a part two. I think, Eric. There's so much that we could talk about here. Like I said, we haven't even gotten into the containment, forensics, communication, recovery. Uh, I think what we should do here before we wrap up is let's circle back to that core question, right? What's the definition of compromise? And I think where I'm at with it, I don't think there's a core definition for the term compromise. I think it's subjective. I mean, if it's just a compromise of an endpoint and lateral movement was limited, yeah, it's a security incident, but I don't think the organization is full on compromised, right? Um, Again, you need to be able to prove there's no lateral movement, and
Right.
not being able to prove is the same as I don't know. Just FYI. But if you can prove there was no lateral movement, not really a compromise. But then again, on the other side, if you find indicators of compromise all over the network, then yeah, in my opinion, that's a full compromise. They own the network at that point. So it's subjective for me. I don't know where you landed, Eric. I'm guessing the same place.
I'm just from a place of, I don't know how much I care about a really locked down definition.
Definition. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know that there's a lot of, and I guess I usually fall on the side of pragmatism. What is the practical upshot of knowing how to define it correctly. And if I can't come up with one, then I'm just going to, we'll skip that and
A
let
security,
the academic sort it out later. We got to get this addressed,
right?
basically. So,
A security
but I
incident
would say
is a security
go on,
incident.
sorry. Yeah, yeah. I was going to say, like, if you want to just talk, what is a compromise? Well, I would say, well, that's anytime anybody has access to something that they shouldn't.
Yeah,
That's I think the simplest way. That's what a compromise is, and it could be benign, but still compromise, still wrong, still shut it down, close it off, make it go away.
yeah,
So,
true.
I mean, I've seen stuff. I'm in healthcare. I've seen patient records I had no business seeing, but I wasn't trying to, and I didn't do anything with it. It's like, just take that away. You know,
Right,
sort of a thing. So things happen. That's technically compromise,
right.
right? So
And we haven't even gotten into the topic of insider threats yet either, which is a
right.
whole other facet of compromise and security incidents. Like, where I'm at with this, Eric, is, and maybe I should ask our listeners here, would you guys like to hear more about security? I mean, this is a sysadmin focused show, right? We want to make sure we cover all of the core topics that you sysadmins are dealing with in the trenches day in and day out, right? Virtualization, cloud, M365, storage, networking, security. We've touched on security in a couple of different episodes, I think. If you would like to hear more about security, go ahead and drop us an email at contact@sysadminweekly.com. I'd love to get your feedback on that. I'm always hesitant to go super deep into security because for a lot of sysadmins, a lot of them are fortunate and have a security team that does that for them, and having kind of what do I want to say, a secondary view of security is adequate. But to me personally, and again, this is probably because I sit in the security space, I think it's valuable information for every sysadmin to have. But that's just me. I'd love to hear your guys' feedback. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Eric, too.
I like where you're heading, so let's do this.
That sounds good. That sounds good. Well, what do you think, Eric? Is that a good spot to wrap it up, you think? And we'll do a part 2 somewhere down the road?
Yeah, let's get some folks' feedback. I would like to see, where we go from here. It's
Because, I mean, I look at our bullet points, like any one of these bullet points could be a whole episode. Just,
absolutely.
in this episode, we've gone a mile wide and a foot deep, So at some point, we'll have to go the other way around on a specific topic. So anyway, well, Eric, I want to thank you for spending some time with us. Always good to talk to you, my friend.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. Those of you watching, thanks for spending some time with us today, or listening, I should say, for those folks that are listening. Appreciate you guys being here. I want to remind you really quick that we are available on all the major podcasting platforms, Amazon, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We are also available out on YouTube. So if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. And additionally, we also have a newsletter that we put out once a week. It's at newsletter.sysadminweekly.com. And it includes a bunch of fantastic resources. We include some of the latest information on the show. We go back and highlight a former episode along with some notes. We include a bunch of fantastic community blog posts. There we go. Also link some useful tools. I usually do like an editorial section of some sort at the beginning. Not too long, not too short, but hopefully just enough to hit all the right notes. But it's a great newsletter, in my opinion. So be sure to check that out at newsletter.sysadminweekly.com. With that, we will let you get back to your day. Thanks for spending some time with us, and we will see you again next week for another episode of SysAdmin Weekly. Have a good one.